Hello again. Welcome back and a very warm welcome if this is your first session with us today. My name is Laura, and this next session is led by Tom Berrington, marketing consultant at the Torch brand agency, who will be talking to us about how to rethink your charity's digital marketing stack. Before I hand over to Tom, and if this is your first session with us today, I just wanted to share our house rules and some pointers for today's session. There'll be time at the end of the session for questions, so please add your questions to the little Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll cover these off at the end. Slides and other resources will be made available after the event. Without any further ado, let me hand over to Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate it. Let me share my screen. Hi, everyone. So my name is Tom Berrington. I work as marketing consultant at the Torch brand agency. We mainly focus on supporting charities as well as a number of public sector initiatives, basically to achieve more reliable results through digital marketing. So today I'm going to be running through a bit more of the specifics when it comes to the tech stack and how best you can assemble the softwares to make sure that you can figure out what you should do next. A big thing that we work with is the case of working with charities where they have a variety of different softwares, but it's difficult to make sure they all integrate together, and it's difficult to know if they're utilizing those softwares at a consistent rate and if they're actually using everything that that software has to offer. So one of the biggest things that we'll be covering is how do you audit the softwares that you currently have? What areas do you need to cut out and what do you need to keep in? And how to basically simplify. The biggest thing that we find is that because there's so many different areas that softwares can help with, you have a dozen softwares doing a dozen different things, or you only have one or two main softwares, like only using WordPress or Google Analytics, things like that, as that's like a baseline that most charities have. But actually adding in the extra systems, the customer relationship management systems, the video editing, the design, it becomes more and more complicated. So a couple of the areas is softwares that do the same thing. So for example, most charities we work with utilize Adobe, but then they also might use something like Canva, and they also then might have other video editing tools like Opus Clip that does AI video editing. And the problem is, do you actually need all those three, especially when Adobe can be quite pricey and Canva is a little bit more simpler and easier to use? And then softwares like Opus, more experimental softwares that are coming in since AI, they're becoming even better. And the problem we find is that, you might have a dozen registrations for Adobe when actually the work that you're doing is changing an image slightly or adding text to an image when Adobe isn't actually needed. So that's a case where if that's the only reason you're using Adobe, it's actually easier to use something like Canva, where you get several users as a part of their cheaper package. That's one example. Another thing is, where do you see the data? Especially when you're running advertising focused on donations, you might be looking at Facebook Ads Manager, TikTok Ads Manager, Google Ads, Google Analytics, WooCommerce if you use that, Shopify if you use that to process payments to your website. You might be even looking at Stripe to see payments. And the difficult thing is, a lot of the times all of those softwares don't integrate together unless you use a software that can do that and that pulls everything together. And so a lot of the information that will allow you to better find out how to get more donations or how to get more people engaged is lost because it's split between a bunch of different platforms. So the biggest thing is how you use your stack. So there's a bunch of different softwares. You've got delivery, so task management, things like Asana, Monday, Trello, things like that. That's usually good for your staff. to make sure that you have a consistent view of what they're working on and what they're planning on working on in the future. You've got email and text marketing, so MailChimp, Brevo, Magic Text, all of those. Email, especially email providers recently, they're trying to combine text on one platform. So it might be that you need half the number of softwares that you would need, but then are you utilizing that most effectively? For example, MailChimp and Brevo are quite different. MailChimp, I believe, does it based on number of registered contacts, whereas Brevo does it on number of emails sent. So, for example, you could have an email list that's huge, but you only send a monthly newsletter to them, in which case Brevo might be actually more effective. But if you have a lot of emails you want to send in a given month, then MailChimp might be the better option because it registers each user rather than how many emails sent. Although that's something that they do look at, but you can basically do more with MailChimp than Brevo in that situation. Another thing is the website. There's a bunch of different ways that people use websites. You've got Umbraco, Django, or custom builds like that. You've got WordPress, Squarespace, Wix. You've got all these different areas, and they all come with their own form of analytics. And then you have to add further analytics on top of that to try and improve the picture of what you're seeing. One of the ways that we do it is through Microsoft Clarity or Hotjar, which is a reporting tool that is free and allows you to record the screen of users coming through, as well as heat mapping, which is incredibly useful for understanding where users drop off, especially with donations. Is it that they're coming onto a specific page where they're talking about, a service that you're offering or a donation that they can give, and they're dropping off at that point, or is it actually that the checkout is too difficult? Another thing that this shows, I think, is particularly good, is mobile compared to desktop or laptop view. A lot of the time we find that 80-90% of the traffic that comes to charity websites are coming through mobile devices. And so when you design the website, that maybe your web designer or your web agency, they design it based on best practice, but on a desktop. And so they actually don't take into consideration that most people are interacting with your website through mobile phone. And things like Clarity allow you to actually see where the faults are with the mobile view, which has been extremely beneficial in improving the conversion rate. Another thing is reporting. One note that I touched on earlier is that there's so many different softwares that you kind of either have to create a separate or use a separate software to pull that information together, or you have to put it in an Excel sheet, delivery roadmap sheet, or something like that to try and get all the information together. Because that's manual work, you never get consistent coverage of whether that is working or isn't working until a month after it's concluded. So it's difficult to do adjustments to improve your advertising if you're constantly trying to update a sheet. Another aspect is design. Again, we touched on that a little bit previously. A big push is everyone using Adobe because it's more professional, and a lot of people think Canva is a bit more like less professional or more amateur, but actually Canva can do most of the things that you would have to do to put together a design. Adobe's good when it comes to very fine-tuning edits and changes, but Canva basically can do anything you need to put together a social media post or an advert, things like that. Another thing, again, is the new supportive layer of softwares, AI softwares like Manus, Claude, ChatGPT. Got a couple here with Zapier, which is good for connecting softwares together. But especially in our work, Manus and Claude have been extremely valuable. Even designing custom landing pages can be done through Claude just from a few prompts. Design a page in this way with these images, this font, and it puts it together in about 15 minutes. Whereas if you did it with a web designer, it might cost a couple £100. The main thing basically the reason I'm bringing up these points is because there are CRM systems that allow you to basically combine all of these different elements. These are a couple of the more well-known ones, The one that we are particularly fond of is the Go High Level CRM system. So these ones combine all softwares together to basically make sure that you can have a full view of what's going on. And it's extremely valuable. Rather than having to log into a dozen different places to get information, it's all in one place. And it might be that a lot of you have CRM systems that you use, but from my experience, the level of usage in terms of understanding that you can integrate advertising, you can integrate different donation methods, you can integrate payments, you can process payments through this, you can send invoices, you can send automated reporting, you can schedule social media. All of these different things can be included in these softwares. And I think it's a really important thing to take into consideration, because a lot of people think CRM system is basically just a fancy version of an Excel document, potentially, where it's easy to figure out where people are coming through from. But actually, this makes, especially from the marketing side, this makes the entire process far easier. And it also, it really helps with making sure people are aware of what their goal is, what their target, because it's difficult when you're on all these different platforms. You can't really suggest what the next goal should be, because you have to separate the information and figure it out for each platform. But with something like this, it actually tells you what you've achieved over the last few months on each platform, what you've achieved combined, and then you can more easily plan for the future and what you'd want to achieve. One thing I was going to do as well was just to share my screen and actually show you an example. So this is an example of high level. This is just a standard new account that we've created for this session. And the idea is that this software basically allows you to cover all those different softwares we spoke about earlier, but in one uniform place. You have individual donors, for example. It gives you information about who they are. You can add in custom fields here. You can email them, SMS them, WhatsApp them through this. You can call directly from the platform. And those calls can be recorded to ensure data compliance, and it will actually pop up here. So you can imagine, especially on activity, these types of things will actually show where they've gone. It's a full funnel software, similar, it's called Blue Whale or other softwares like it, where they track the end-to-end journey of users. It's extremely valuable, because then we actually figure out where are people coming from. The bigger problem that I know is a big problem is figuring out where people are coming from, especially with charity, where you have quite a long-term point in which they see you to a point at which they donate. The problem with platforms like Facebook and TikTok is it drives a lot of engagement for a very efficient rate, but then it comes through as direct, or it comes through as no referral in GA4, which basically means just there's not much data can be used to actually figure out where they're coming from. And that's usually a problem with Google. Wants you to use Google, especially for Google Analytics. If you're just using that, it will show Google advertising very well. When it comes to paid social, you might look at Meta and it says 100,000 landing page views on the website. And then you look at GA4 and it says 50. And there's a clear gap there. And that is something that this can resolve really well. And it's similar to that of HubSpot, things like that. These CRM systems are brilliant at full funnel tracking. And in the charity sector, this is more needed than any other sector, because of the length of time it takes for someone to look at something you've shown to them actually donating. And I think that's one of the most important considerations. This also, especially if you're working, for example, marketing and donor care teams, can go hand in hand a lot, because donor care can be very strong and marketing can be very strong, but if there isn't communication between those teams, then it's difficult for donor care to figure out where those people came from. So a lot of the work that we did, especially in the aid relief sector, is marketing bringing in leads, donor care converting, and then donor care reconverting them later, or getting them on regular monthly subscriptions or donations packages. And obviously that's all assigned to the donations and donor care teams. So you never actually know how much marketing actually did. So the problem becomes a bit more like marketing is saying, we get all these clicks, all of these impressions, that's good. Really, you want to figure out how much weight is that actually doing for revenue generated within the organization. Another point is on PR teams. It can be difficult for them to show the direct value of their work because PR is an intangible system. Like, that's not what PR is built to do. But at least with this, we're able to have a clearer view of where people have come from. Have they referred from articles that have been published? Have they been referred from third-party websites? Things like that help just give a complete overview. Another point in this system, for example, is you can create the calendars if you're wanting to speak to individual people or individual donors. Another area is opportunities, which can be really good for a donations team to be able to classify them and move them into different stages of the funnel. When you move them into this funnel, for example, you could add in an automation that fires on that. And there's just so much value in the idea that if donor care or like the sales team, donations team, they use something like this, can, like, most of the time marketing never knows what happens after that point. But with this, it joins both of the teams together so that when, the donors come through and they've been moved to somewhere like here, they can go through a dedicated lead nurture, and it can be custom to each of the field names included here, all of this information. Another thing, again, with this particular software, it's even larger where you can register a full website, do all your website advertising through this, through something like WordPress, and you can connect it up. Another area is the social media. So for example, you can connect all your social media and schedule content through this software. You can do the email campaigns, the text campaigns. You can also link all the advertising platforms to one place, so you can actually have a big view. And this isn't just high level. This is any CRM system that's worth their salt has a function like this to simplify all of these processes. And the value of having everything in one place means that you don't forget email posting. You don't forget text delivery. You can check on delivery to see. A big thing that especially these email providers might not check is whether it actually delivers to the person. That's a huge thing to consider. If you don't link up your domain to your email provider, almost all of your emails will go straight to spam, and you'll never know that it's gone to spam. So there's a huge amount of revenue wasted in just that alone. So understanding deliverability of emails, especially when you're doing consistent newsletters or donation pushes where you want to get previous donors to re-engage, it's extremely valuable to know if that has actually delivered. So the main reasons for consolidating, one is obviously the ability to reduce the total costs you can have. Most notable on this, for example, we were working with a counselling charity up north that registered a Calendly account for each counsellor they had, and it increased and increased to the point at which they were spending £6,000–7,000 per year on just Calendly bookings. Now, with something like High Level, they can have unlimited counsellors with unlimited calendars for £70 a month, on top of all the extra bits. So, for example, we brought them on board, and we were able to cut out the need for their Hootsuite and later accounts. We were able to cut out the need for any additional website fees because we could integrate it into the system. We didn't need MailChimp, we didn't need Brevo, We didn't need leads bridge or Zapier to connect leads that come through advertising to a platform. It could all be done from this. So not only did they not have, or they saved the 6,000, they saved an extra 2,000 to 3,000 on that using that software. So actually the CRM system paid for itself and more the moment we moved everything over. Another area is the one source of truth. That's the most important aspect, which is that getting everything to be in one place is so valuable. And just that alone, it makes it so easier to figure out what's working, what isn't working, and how to improve it moving forwards. And then the final thing is less manual admin. So, for example, I remember when I was working in one of the areas that I had to log in every day or every bit of time that passed into Hootsuite to check things, into MailChimp to send emails, into TextMagic to check if they're delivered. I'd have to check each advertising platform individually. Whereas with this, it's all in one place. You log in once, you see it in one place, and it saves so much time. Main takeaways. The biggest thing is that I couldn't recommend enough to audit the stack. I deal a lot with charities in which they have softwares because their staff members have left and they think that that software is needed to continue when it isn't. I also see a lot of situations. I think there's an assumption that, for example, like working in charity might not pay as good as commercial, but a lot of companies, I think, overcharge to charities a lot of the time because they can. And so actually what I find is that some charities are actually charged more than a commercial company for certain agency work. And so I think that's a really important thing to consider. I'll finish now. Sorry about that.
You've still got
Yeah.
5 minutes. You're all right.
Oh. But yeah, so I think that was the main point, is that being able to make sure your tech stack is cleaner. Identifying like whether you're getting overcharged, I think is such a big thing that we do a lot of work all the time, because I think there's an assumption that you aren't being overcharged, but actually you are. And another is trying to understand where you need to put your budget. And this gives a clear framework for where you need to spend next to get more success in your charity. Perfect. That's been me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was really fascinating. We've had a couple of questions in, so I can read those out. So does Go High Level talk to Impact Stack and MailChimp? We use Razor's Edge and it doesn't talk directly to MailChimp and it's turned into a bit of a pain point now.
Shall I just shut this down? So the point is that you don't need MailChimp with this.
Right.
You can do it all through this. Like are you still seeing my screen?
Yeah.
So for example, it does emails. It shows deliverability. It shows bounce rate. It shows all the information that MailChimp does. And it's not a case of it's unlimited users you can have. MailChimp gets extremely expensive once you go over like 10 or 15,000 users. And with because email is so important for charities, that can just get bigger and bigger and bigger. But with this, it doesn't do it like that. And so you can actually design it all through this system. And you can automate the process of someone comes in, if they've shown interest in a particular area, then send them this email. Or, if they've donated, then add them to this lead nurture. And I think the biggest thing on the email side is we have seen more success where like there's a much higher ROI on smaller charities than larger charities. That's to be expected, obviously, because they're using less budget, so it might be able to go further. But when we employ text, just that alone, there's charities that we've worked with that spend or have revenue of 50, 60, 70 million a year, not using text. And just adding text suddenly spikes ROI because you're actually having a conversation with that person, or you're actually getting through to them. And I think that's such a big thing that's forgotten, especially on the marketing side, is, are your emails actually being received?
Mm,
Because it might show you that, but until you send it to yourself, you don't actually know like whether it actually comes through correctly and whether it looks right. Because there's a lot of work with, if you're having the dark version of an email system, that like you can't really see an email that you send because it's designed to work in light version. There's all
mm,
these little caveats, and I think the most important thing is when you look at email, not just to look at this many emails were sent, because they'll send no matter what, but whether they deliver or not, and whether it doesn't land in spam, that's a whole different area.
definitely. Thank you very much. There's also been a question about social media posting. So, it's from a small charity who needs a software which is efficient, and they've been using Meta for Business, and it's not the most useful for them. And yeah, do you have any recommendations?
On social media scheduling systems.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
depends on the system that they're using, because I know
Mm,
there's a couple of like Hootsuite is quite expensive for what it does, and you never really need necessarily always, unless you're a larger charity, you never always need to look at all the different things that they do. I know that they offer some good charity discounts.
through Charity Digital. We've put a link into the chat, so yeah, you can get a 60% discount through Charity Digital. A little plug there.
That is really good, especially because Hootsuite, especially on the PR side, to understand competition and
Mm,
like what other people are doing. Well, for a standard social media scheduling system, something like Later can be quite good. It's quite cheap and easy to deliver. I mean, it also depends on what you're sending it to. If you're just doing Facebook and Instagram, then you could just do it through the business suite in Facebook, and that's no charge on you at all. This system does that as well. So it does social media scheduling on all platforms, included within that one fee. But yeah, so like it depends on the software that they use and why. But Later is quite a good one that I like to use.
thank you very much. I think that's all the questions we have. So thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, it was really interesting to hear more about the tech side of things. I think that's definitely a blind spot in my knowledge. So yeah, thank you so much.